we are all little kings. That's going to be fun. 2, courage has died and we do not mourn her. 3, we are chocolate soldiers.
Chocolate soldier. I'm so interested in what these points mean.
And 4, it's all your fault.
It was you. You in chat. You think I'm not talking to you specifically? It was you specifically. What do you mean? Oh my God. People have been saying, like, the old idiom of, like, don't talk religion and politics. You know, like, that's been a very long time that, you know, divisive issues on politics. And I remember there was a time where a senator in our nation tried to beat a man to death for his position on slavery because his position was against slavery. And he beat him to near death with his cane because he found it offensive. And we're going to say that now because someone might not look at you at the dinner table, that's the line where a nation has gone too far in offensiveness? That is bizarre.
Really just try to step back and look at our times as...
By the way, the only way to save America from being weak is to donate, sub, and support DylanBurnsTV on Twitch. Anyway, let's learn how we are the weakest generation of all time. Let's learn about it.
There's a quote by an author named Michael Hoff, and it goes something like this.
So curious how we are the weakest generation ever.
Hard times make strong men. Strong men create good times.
I have also saw that impact font meme.
Good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. And you can really see this idea rolling through the ages, and that wheel of history turning is just soaked blood red by not understanding that hard times means lots of people die, tyrants rise up and rule. And so this is a really painful lesson that we have to keep learning over and over. And I wonder if we become even weaker. Let's imagine for a moment that we are the weakest generation right now that has ever walked the face of the planet. I actually believe that. I think we are the weakest people that have ever walked on planet Earth before.
I would actually, if you want to know who I think were the weakest people ever, the first would be the commanders who sent the Soviet army into Finland. The second would be probably the generation that got murked by a bunch of rats. That's the plague, my guy. I would say those two are probably the weakest.
And I wonder, and I'm gonna back that up in just a moment here, but I wonder, the weaker the person, the worse the times to come are. Probably so. Anyway, here's kind of the way I want to break this up. I have 4 major points. Here they are. 1, we are all little kings. That's gonna be fun. 2, courage has died and we do not mourn her. 3, we are chocolate soldiers.
Chocolate soldier. I'm so interested in what these points mean.
And 4, it's all your fault. So I want to go through these 4 pieces to...
It was you. You in chat. You think I'm not talking to you specifically? It was you specifically.
Really just try to step back and look at our times as...
By the way, the only way to save America from being weak is to donate, sub, and support DylanBurnsTV on Twitch. Isn't that right, ladies? Isn't that right?
They are, and see where we are in that wheel of history. So we might understand that when the bad times, which are just around the corner, happen, we understand where it's coming from and what it requires to get out of that business. All right, so the first point, we're all little kings. And what I mean by that, my wife and I were over in London. We saw the Tower of London where all these different kings lived. You can also imagine emperors over the time period, but they're still like going to the bathroom and pots and, you know, low age expectancy and no real medical treatment, and they're sweating it out in the summers and freezing in the winters, and you know, they don't have ibuprofen or Benadryl or any of the modern kind of creature comforts. And so today, even our lowest socioeconomic class in the United States, we live in greater comfort and luxury than any of the emperors of old. We're going to step into our vehicle, which can transport us.
Okay, so I don't agree with this. So it is true that we have more technology, but this is true of every generation comparative to the last generation. And number 2, there's a lot of things an emperor has that we don't. An emperor has people coming to their every need. If I want my back scratched, if I want this, if I want that, if I want to go sleep with 20 women, if I'm an emperor, bring me 20 women of my choosing. Like, they got no chance. I'm emperor. If I want my feet rubbed, they come do that. That complete power and completely not having to struggle for that at all is something that emperors have. And that gets to my second point, the lack of struggle. You're born into royalty. You're born into privilege. You're born into a life without struggle as emperor. That isn't true today. You can say that I don't have to struggle to do every part to make a burrito, but that was true of many societies where people specialized, and this was when human society continued to develop, specialized in certain industries. Some people specialized in factories, some people specified in leather crafting or tool making, and they would get food from others. And that would continue to develop. So I don't understand, like, they still had to struggle for those jobs. They still had to struggle to stay above water. And today, people still struggle to stay above water. It's like 1 in 5 or 1 in 7 kids still struggle with food insecurity.
A curd is a curd.
There's a lot of people who still struggle with starvation and homelessness and stuff like that. Even the strongest in our society, veterans, suffer with mental health issues like PTSD and homelessness.
A curd is a curd.
So there's still struggle in modern society. People are still struggling. And they will continue to struggle. It's just, I guess, overall though, people are struggling for more.
A curd
as
is
in,
a curd.
For the people who are middle class and upper middle class, they are struggling for something greater. Even if the struggle isn't to literally just feed themselves, the struggle might be for a better house, a better life, a better car, or soldiers in the modern age struggling for strategic objectives. So there's still struggle, and people don't get like weighted on their every hand in need, and they don't have all resources at their disposal because there's certain things that kings had that we don't. So I don't think the comparison to little kings is true. You could say that we have more conveniencies or like things that are convenient or technological luxuries comparative to a king, but that'll be true of every generation. That'll be true of the next generation after us. And Sepson, thank you so much for the 5 gifted tier 1s. I really appreciate that, buddy. First gift donos of the night.
80 miles an hour somewhere else, journeys that would have taken months and you might have died at, is now just kind of a casual day trip where we can artificially control the environment to 71 degrees with perfect lumbar support, as we're just being able to drive to an airport and then be flown to any place in the world while we sit in a seat flying through the sky. That's pretty amazing. And people serve us stuff, and we're able to have ice in all of our drinks on demand. I've got a refrigerator just stacked with food and a freezer.
By the way, I just want to say, having nice things do not make you weak. The best boxers in the world are also incredibly wealthy, and they can kick some fucking ass. Just because you have nice things or some modern luxuries doesn't make you weak. It means there might be certain things that you don't have the same strengths in, right? I bet the average person in the world doesn't know how to like craft a fire by themselves, but that's because it's something that's not needed anymore. At least not on a grand scale.
Right there, just all this food ready. We don't have to go gather or hunt at each meal. This is incredible. We got a 60-inch TV on the wall. I've got a 50-inch TV on the wall, but still, a 50-inch TV there on the wall. And I'm sitting in my house eating a snack with a perfectly controlled artificial environment around me. I could be even having ice cream, something an emperor in the middle. No one's getting ice cream. Are you kidding me? And when I'm done, I'm gonna go take a completely on-demand hot shower. Then I can stream hours and hours of the most amazing content from any type of age or genre. Holy smokes, we could entertain ourselves today. And then you can make a complete living with just typing away from your couch. You make a living, right? You can order groceries that are delivered to your door. You see? I mean, like, yeah, it's true. You don't wield supreme executive authority by any means, but holy cow, the amount of comfort and luxury and entertainment, even our lowest socioeconomic class entertains to this day, is far, far more extravagant than a lot of the emperors of old.
In some extents, but now when it comes to the women or necessarily the food, you could say, oh, wait, What about the food? There's a lot of people that are still food insecure, and a lot of people who still can't buy the grandest foods in the realm. Like, you can't get the best chefs and cooks to make you stuff all the time. An emperor, if he wanted a steak every day, he could request that. He could ask for that. And you know what? The people have to have it done. Random people can't do that. There's certain luxuries we have that they didn't have, like video games and tech. But again, that's true of every generation. So that makes nothing about this generation especially weak than the last.
Now, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just means the more coddled we are, the more we're able to distance ourselves from suffering. Even some type of medical thing of like, oh, I don't want to feel that. And they have local or general anesthetic. If like it looks like too much pain, I'm like, just put me out and do the thing. It's like, wow, doctors aren't even bleeding us with leeches anymore, right? If like, holy smokes, we can almost...
Well, yeah, but that didn't work. And so now we have medicine that does work. And in fact, I would argue that makes people stronger, because that means instead of me like dying because I scraped my knee, I have a better chance of survival. Wouldn't that make us stronger, not weaker?
Distance ourselves from all...
The fact that somebody who loses their leg can now get artificial limbs that will make them to still be able to function like they did before they lost that limb, that makes us as a society stronger. We can have healthier people working in our factories who, no matter the disability, are still able to contribute to society.
Almost all physical pain if we wanted to, and sit in absolute comfort every moment until we die. That's pretty remarkable. But what that means is one day when the hot water is out, we have to join what everybody did for thousands of years and just like take a cold bath, if you even get a bath, kind of thing. Most of us can't even wrap our heads around that. And what that means is we're just coddled, we're fragile, we're spoiled, we're high maintenance. I'm privy to it as well. I'm just kind of being like, man, we're all little kings, aren't we? Let's move to the second point. All right, the second thing is absolutely shocking to me, truly, and it's this: courage has died and we do not mourn her. Over all human history, courage is like this top virtue that all society over all time celebrates. Be courageous. And to call someone a coward, man, they might duel you to the death. You don't call someone a coward. Now, though, something absolutely shocking has happened. Courage is no longer seemingly celebrated. Instead, we're competing to see who can be the biggest victims.
Oh my God. Okay, number one, courage is still celebrated. If you look at military and how we, before every football game, we have to have a big military moment where we all sing the national anthem. You have fighter jets come over. We got like junior ROTC. We advertise the military to our youth through Twitch. We play up the idea of the bravery and courage of the soldier, or modern war fix of American heroes overcoming adversity and being courageous in combat. The stories of firefighters going into the flames. These are still things that are held in extremely high regard. When there's a story of somebody saving somebody else from near death and doom, you'll have Fox News and the rest of the media outlets cover it as a local hero. People love those feel-good stories. People still love courage and courageous people. And this idea of victimhood, I mean, I assume, well, let me just listen before I say. I don't want to assume. Let me listen.
Philosophically, this is called intersectionality, and basically it's saying you're not a unique individual. Instead, everyone belongs to a group, and all these groups are in contention for power. If you're into...
No, okay, number one. Okay, so now I know where the 100% this is going. I thought it was going to go this way, and it did. So, number one, they're not competing to be the biggest victim. They're just describing what happened to them. They're describing how the world interacts with them. They're being honest about it. And I would say taking courage and bucking the norms on how people talk about things, whether it be rape, sexual assault, or oppression, racism, I think that takes a level of courage, because you're going to get pushback, right? For example, I don't think, and I don't like to call me coming forward about my being raped when I was little something that was courageous. I don't like to call it that. But you know what I had to deal with? A lot of people coming up to me and using that against me. Trying to use that to like in emails or messages like, fuck you, I hope you get raped again. Or like talking about like other stuff like, I hope you go back to the psych ward, I hope you kill yourself. Like any of these types of things. And coming forward and having to deal with those types of comments, it would have been a lot easier for me to just keep it to myself and never talk about it. Is that me being a victim? Is that me going around asking for like attention? No, that's not what I'm trying to do. That's not me lunging for victimhood. Someone might argue that coming forward about such things takes a certain level of courage, depending upon, number one, you're putting the spotlight on yourself. Number two, you're making yourself weak for the public audience. You're showing a vulnerable spot and basically allowing the public to shoot at that spot. Take a bullseye right at your heart, right at somewhere that's close and personal to you. That takes courage. And when it comes to the issue of intersectionality, that's a way of viewing the world. It is just 100% based in fact. So if you say that facts is cowardly by the way of you just analyzing how the world interacts with you, for example, no one would deny that somebody who is blind and also can't walk has some disadvantages compared to somebody who's healthy and can see and can walk perfectly fine. And what intersectionality says is that the inability to see and the inability to walk, or those two things basically stack on top of each other to impact how you view the world. And in this example, you would not be able to walk around, so that's one problem you have to deal with, and you wouldn't be able to see, so you'd have to use one of those sticks or seeing eye dogs. And that both impacts your world differently than somebody else who can walk and can see. That is just factual. That is true. That we do interact with the world differently. If I had no arm, I interact with it differently than somebody who does have an arm. This is just a statement of fact. It doesn't make us weak, to be honest, about how the world interacts with us. How does it make it weak? They're not saying these things because they want to be a victim. They're saying these things because they're being honest about how the world treats them. And I think honesty about how the world interacts with it, how it interacts with you and how you interact with the world, that takes a certain level of courage.
To intersectionality philosophy, you basically believe a person's race.
And by the way, it doesn't get rid of somebody's individuality, but it does admit that things impact you. Like, I don't think that somebody who has to use a wheelchair everywhere is not an individual, but I do know that them having a wheelchair has impacted the way they live their life. Intersectionality just admits that, which you would have to tell me. For you to tell me intersectionality is false, you'd have to tell me that somebody with no arms, no legs, and is blind, and is poor and lives in a ditch. Those different things combined together does not give that person a unique experience in life in comparison to everyone else. In fact, intersectionality is dependent upon the uniqueness of the individual, because it's talking about how people's unique experiences are, how these things interact to create a person's unique experience. Who they are, where they came from, their money, their values, their racial background, their immigration status. These things interact with that individual to create the unique experience. Intersectionality wouldn't work if there weren't individuals. If there was just all groups of people, then it wouldn't be stacking upon each other. It wouldn't be intersectionality. It would just be segmenting people off into groups.
Gender, socioeconomic status, and sexuality really defines who they are as a person inside a greater group that basically sponsors that. And the more of these groups you belong to, and you're more in the minority class, that means you have greater and greater amounts of moral superiority. So
wait, that's not a principle. There's nobody idea they have greater amounts of moral superiority. It just means you have different challenges. Nobody's morally superior because they had more challenges. My life compared to somebody who's ultra wealthy in Beverly Hills, I don't have moral superiority because I have less money than them. The cashier doesn't have moral superiority over Bill Gates just because Bill Gates has more money. That's not why. It would probably be because Bill Gates has probably done some stuff in his life that was immoral, or the cashier has done something in their life is immoral. It has nothing to do with moral superiority. It has to do with the challenges that people face and being honest about that.
For instance, if you are a Christian white male, there's a lot of those, then your opinion really isn't worth much.
That's not what it says. You're just assuming stuff that isn't true.
But if you are from a minority class of some kind, so that if you are black, gay, female, trans person, now you've achieved multiple victim statuses across a lot of different groups, and so you wield supreme moral authority.
No, oh my God, that's not what it has to do with. You want to know what? Now, there is a grain of truth to this, but not in the way he thinks it is. The grain of truth is that if you're a black person, you probably know more about what it means to be a black person than a white person. And a white person probably knows what it's like more about what it's like to be a white person. And therefore, when speaking about the experience of being a black man or a white man, the black man would probably have more grounding to speak on that from a position of authority of being a black person than a white person. The same way that a black person could not speak from a position of authority to the same extent as a white person does because of the personal experiences they have. You can look at data, you can look at statistics, you can still talk about it, but you don't have that experience with having that identity. That's the closest I could get to what he's trying to say. But nobody's saying that you can't speak up now because you're a white man. And if they are, then they're stupid. I'm sorry.
Your opinion counts and mine doesn't. I'm evil, I'm oppressor, and you are good because you are minority.
That's not what it is. That's not the dynamic. The evil or bad or good and gracious stuff would only maybe apply to systems of authority, not to individuals in a system. And you're trying to talk about how good individuality is in comparison to this group structure, yet you remove yourself of your own individuality.
That's how intersectionality works. But basically, the gist of it is this. Super upside down weird thing is happening. We're competing to see who can be the greatest victim. And victimhood means your opinion is worth more.
Nobody's
Victimhood
doing
means
that.
You're morally superior. Guys, it's not
God, guys, I really hope I get raped again tomorrow so I can get 2 more victim points. Oh boy, I'm sorry. That's not happening. Why would somebody purposely want to stack more challenges against themselves just so maybe they get a few sympathy points on Twitter? That sounds ridiculous to me.
race or gender or sexuality or socioeconomic class. It's not that all the rich are evil and all the poor are good. It's that everybody should be evaluated as individuals to be a good person, be a loving person, be giving, be generous. That's the stuff. It's what are your ideas? What are your beliefs? You don't get a token pass just because you belong to a minority group. Doesn't mean you're right or wrong. Each value and belief should, and each person should be evaluated individually, not as a group. So the intersectionalists are wrong, and we shouldn't compete just to be victims.
By the way, that guy earlier, he was calling me a CIA shill, just ended up calling me the F slur. So, I mean, you know what? I you know, you peg a guy. I guess I was a little more on point than I thought.
This is crazy pills, nuts. I feel crazy that I even have to say that. You know, I'm still living Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream of he has a dream that his kids wouldn't be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, right? But intersectionality immediately kind of like Martin Luther King Jr. Who? What? And
okay, number one, that's Martin Luther King Jr. I could not imagine Martin Luther King Jr. not being able to understand intersectionality and a concept. And Martin Luther King Jr., and I hate to be, because every single white person on the planet would like to speak for him, but if we're doing it, you're doing it, I might as well do it as well. He'd smack you across the face non-violently for something like that, because he had a few efforts in his career of activism. He had, of course, the civil rights movement, where he tried to fight for the liberation of black people, but he also had another thing, and that was the poor people's campaign that he was trying to start. And I'm pretty sure he would acknowledge that a rich black person has it better than a poor black person. But a black person still has certain disadvantages compared to a white person. That was the whole point of the civil rights movement. But a rich black person would have it better off because they have more access to resources comparative to a poor black person. Meaning that a poor black person, when you're poor and black, that's two things set against you. Do you really think Martin Luther King would disagree with that analysis? That somebody who's poor and black has a lot set up against them in comparison to somebody who is rich and black or rich and white? I'm sick of people using MLK to try to justify the continuation of systems of oppression and destroy critical analysis.
just ran right past what he was saying. Our third thing, guys, is we are chocolate soldiers. That's an interesting phrase.
Are you going to quote MLK for this one too?
It's chocolate soldiers. I stole that from a dude named C.T. Studd, who was basically calling out some of his peers because they had the appearance of being courageous, but really when the slightest amount of heat was applied to them, they would melt away. I mean, you look like you're brave, but you're really not. We're chocolate soldiers. Now today, we like to imagine that we're all fierce and strong-willed and strong-minded. But listen, I wrote this. Everything is offensive now. Cat in the Hat, canceled. MAGA hats, old statues in parks, inconvenient facts of history.
Well, okay. The thing is, it wasn't now that they're offensive. It's now they're getting more attention, okay? Now, I don't know if every single thing you just named is offensive, or why you would claim this or that is offensive. But I do think that somebody enslaving black people and holding them into a position of moral superiority as they fought for the cause of slavery in the Civil War in treason against the United States as a proud American, I find that offensive. They would hold treason in high regard. They would hold the bondage of men in high regard. That we would hold racism in high regard. So you know what? Yeah, I find it a little offensive to my pro-American sensibilities. Maybe these are things you view more sympathetically. I doubt it. Or the Cat in the Hat. I think it's stupid. I don't really care. But are you really going to argue that Chinese men with squinty eyes and chopsticks running around in a book isn't a racist depiction? What about Africans with bones through their noses? You think that's a good depiction? Is that a not racist depiction? I mean, we can be honest about this media and say it is. Yeah, it's racist. But that doesn't mean we should throw our Dr. Seuss out. There's boom. That's all you need to say. Think something can be offensive and still be worth preserving if you want to make that argument, right? But arguing that it wasn't offensive in the first place is just living in fantasy land.
Number of genders, disagreement on what is healthy sexuality.
So I love how this is like, we are the weakest country of all time, and it's just him complaining about the left for the whole time. That the left is making America weak, and the right is making America strong, as they purposely try to avoid like taking medical authorities' recommendations on a pandemic, pushing forward America be a sicker place. Sick people are usually not known for their strength. I just want to throw that out there. So if we have more Americans dying from a disease, that's not a symbol of strength. I would actually say that's a symbol of weakness.
The state of policing in America, guns and the Second Amendment, Karl Marx, climate change, BLM.
What, Karl Marx? What does that have to do with
Elections, the Kung flu, Israel, abortion, and 1,000 other triggers that send us running into our safe spaces. It appears that we're not able to speak.
By the way, like we've always had people who get offended at stuff, like get offended at stuff. Here's a great example. In the 1960s, there was like a little black girl who tried to like go to like a white school and like integrate, and people like came out with nooses, talking like, "I'm gonna lynch her, I'm gonna kill her, I'm gonna kill that N-word." Wow, they seemed pretty offended. Guess they're the weakest generation in history. Why? Because a black girl wanted to study next to Billy? That's silly. Yeah, it is silly. People are offended about stuff in every generation. You just weren't alive during that media cycle. What about, I mean, like the rock music in the 90s. Somebody just brought this up in chat. The rock music's gonna bring the devil. And during the 50s, it was, you know, if Billy kisses Susan, or beware the homosexuals, the old 1950s anti-gay PSAs. They're getting offended at the existence of homosexuals. All the anti-gay laws that have existed throughout the years. What is that? That is getting offended at the existence of gay people. The entirety of the Confederacy was the offensiveness was built up in part due to how they found the idea that black men should not be in bondage. They found that offensive to their sensibilities. And the civil rights and the anti-civil rights movement and the Confederacy was also held up by the idea that it's offensive to suggest that black people and white people are equal. People have been offended by a lot of crazy stuff for a very long time. Doesn't make sense for me at this point.
Openly about anything. You're at a dinner, or maybe it's a holiday with your family, and you know, don't talk about politics because that relative may not ever talk to you again over it. Can't talk to your neighbors about elections. Can't talk to your coworkers about firearms. Can't talk to anybody even about the weather because climate change, right? Everyone's so easily...
What do you mean? Oh my God. People have been saying, like, the old idiom of, like, don't talk religion and politics. You know, like, that's been a very long time that, you know, divisive issues on politics. And I remember there was a time where a senator in our nation tried to beat a man to death for his position on slavery because his position was against slavery, and he beat him to near death with his cane because he found it offensive. And we're gonna say that now because someone might not look at you at the dinner table, that's the line where a nation has gone too far in offensiveness? That is bizarre.
Triggered and offended. It wasn't terribly long ago, maybe in the last just generation, few decades, where it became impossible to talk about the stuff that really matters. Don't talk about money, God, or politics. It's kind of like, well, that's kind of like the most important stuff, though, of like, what does that mean? Or like, what do I just talk about the weather? And now we can't even really talk about the weather, as I said, because before you couldn't talk about what matters. Now it seems like we can't even talk about what doesn't matter. Everyone needs a safe space. We are all so pathetically weak and triggered. Just delicate.
People protested a black girl just trying to go to school. They wanted a whites-only safe space. That's what that was. Come on.
Little snowflakes, all of us. Everyone's just made of glass, walking around, and if you just broach the subject that I'm not ready for, I'll either get angry or I'll excommunicate you. We can't just agree to disagree. That doesn't happen anymore. And so the public discourse seems to be just let down. What happened to just being able to have a disagreement with somebody over something and be like, Roger that. You think one way, I think another.
Dude, people have killed each other for decades upon decades, for centuries over political disagreements. If I had a political disagreement about race mixing in the South, I'd be strung up from a tree depending on the year. And so would the fellow, or madam or sir, I engage with them. Could you imagine me walking in the middle of Alabama in, say, 1830 with a black man and be like, yeah, this is my boyfriend? We'd both be killed. But this is just a simple political disagreement. Why are you all so triggered? And then our necks snap because of the news. Like this has existed a lot longer. If anything, we have probably gotten to the point where it's the least offensive, because you want to know what? Not a lot of people are getting killed anymore for just stating a political position or being married to the person they want to be married to.
Way, and we can just agree to disagree. Remember back when we could do that? You could just disagree with somebody without wishing death upon them or calling them Hitler. That used to be a thing. You could do that. Not everyone that disagreed you.
The thing is, I was just called the F slur. I mean, not Hitler, but, you know, that's what I was called.
With you was a Nazi, but now it's immediate. You disagree? Nazi. You're a Nazi. You're racist. Everything's racist. This phone, racist. Look at this. This strip. It's all racist. Everything's racist until nothing's racist. Now when someone like calls me a racist, I'm on YouTube, so I get called racist a lot. I'm kind of like, all right, I worship.
I love how it's turned from I'm sick of this victimhood to like, see, I'm the victim because people call me racist. Wonderful. Get over it. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm sorry if it hurts your feelings. You know, I'm sick of all these people wanting their little YouTube safe space from getting called racist, you know.
Worship a brown Middle Eastern man as God, yet I'm still racist. All right, whatever. Now it's like a buzzing in my ear. I don't even really hear it anymore because everything and everyone's a racist.
The Ku Klux Klan also worshipped that same man and lynched black people. Being a Christian isn't a card to be designated not racist.
Until you've watered down the term where it doesn't really mean anything anymore. Of like, no, hey, racism is real and it's awful and it's super shallow, and dude, you suck if you're racist. But when everyone's all of a sudden a racist,
that's a hell of a condemnation. If you're racist, you suck.
Racist, I'm kind of like, oh well, racist. Yeah, I get it. Everyone's a racist, and that kind of thing's happening. It's like the word is so overused, it's losing its actual potency. So I'm on a little bit of a tirade. We really need to move on to point 4. Everything is your fault. It's not my fault. If you ask me what's wrong with the world, it's the systems. It's the capitalists, or it's the president, or it's the institutions of power. You know what's wrong. It's the universe. It's the media. It's the system. It's the man. It's keeping you down. It's my boss is an idiot.
This is how we've... The thing is, how I know this guy would not do the same analysis in any other part in history. Would we go to the Great Depression and tell someone who just lost their job, like, wow, you're really going to blame this administration for not responding to the financial crisis appropriately? Just blame everyone else. Of course, there's always a certain amount of personal responsibility that should be taken when one takes care of themselves. But humans can usually be overwhelmed by overwhelming forces. Like right now, the economy went Great Depression. I would be out of a job because you guys are going to be too busy trying to feed yourselves than to donate bits and subs and stuff. Now you can say, Dylan, are you really going to blame the president who tried to replace all of our paper with donkeys for the financial depression? Personally, I'd say yes, because sometimes these bad issues and bad places we're put in are caused by outside forces. Not all the time. Some people are a little blame happy, but yes, like people are caught up in the forces of history, whether it be World War II, World War I, the Great Depression, the plague. This happens all the time. Like, you're really going to tell somebody coughing with the plague, like, I mean, maybe if you just cleaned your shoes before you walked in, maybe you scraped them on the welcome mat, then you wouldn't be in the situation. Your fault.
It's always someone else's fault, isn't it? I love Jordan Peterson in his 12 Rules for Life. He talks about clean up your own room, and he's basically just saying, hey, take responsibility for your own sphere. If you want to change the world, make it better. You can't change the world. You can't change all the huge institutions of power, all the things that have gone awry. But you can change yourself. And if I was to come alive and be better than I am now, if I was to become a more loving man, a more generous man, a stronger man, and all the different ways that strength entails, all the people around me would probably grow a little too. And in that way, that's how we change the world. It's you get better. Don't change the stuff. It is so true that there's political corruption and there's all kinds of greed. And this world is so hopelessly broken, desperately needs some Jesus. Anyway, the world is absolutely broken. And so I won't disagree with you there. But at some point, it can't just always, all wrongs in your life can't be someone else's fault. At some point, we just got to own it and be like, hey, you know what?
Well, of course. But this is different from somebody saying like, hey, part of the reason I don't have a job right now is the president tried to replace all the money with donkeys. Like, that would have a real impact on people's lives because politicians make decisions that hurt people. They could place too many regulations on small businesses and they go under. Or they could place too little restrictions on building code, and then you have whole apartment blocks go under, like in Florida. There's things outside of your control sometimes that you just can't look out for. Of course, there needs to be a certain amount of personal responsibility that everyone takes, but that could not remove responsibility of the large politicians, organizations, and corporations that are responsible for many of the problems we have in today's society.
What? I can change me, and I'm the problem with me. My biggest problem is actually me. It's not out there, it's me. I'm my biggest problem, right? And so we're in the age of non-accountability. We'd rather sue somebody else, blame somebody else, complain, go all caps lock on Facebook.
I mean, people have done this forever. I mean, look at Hitler. Hitler blamed all of Germany's problems on the Jews and the globalists and the elites or whatever. And then, of course, went in office and, did his bad thing. This is, of course, there's always been people who've chosen scapegoats. People have done that with homosexuals. People have done that with black people. People have done that with minority groups. It's happened forever in history and happens today. So this isn't something that's special about today's society.
Decrying everyone else.
Hitler literally convinced the whole nation that all their issues would go away if they just did something about the Jews. And convinced them that was the case, got into office, and scapegoated so hard that even when he didn't fix all of their economic woes, they still believed him.
The villain, when we're really just conveniently changing the subject so we don't have to really deal with our own stuff. Our laziness, our apathy, our cowardice, our insecurities, our frivolity when it comes to, spending maturely on a budget, our inability to really invest in loving those people around us. That's the thing. We're procrastinators. We're lazy. We're self-centered. And at some point, we need to start taking some type of accountability. These are 4 factors that are all coming together to make us the weakest generation that's ever walked the planet. We're all little kings. It's always someone
I was muted.
else's
I'm sorry, I
fault.
was muted, but basically he said, I wish any of these points had merit. Instead, it was just bait to talk about his problems with the left, or his perceived problems with the left.
We're not taking responsibility for our own crap. We're all chocolate soldiers, and that we're just so easily offended. And we don't even really value courage as this great attribute anymore. Where's all the strong men gone? Right? How many times do we see those heroes in television shows? Where's bold masculinity?
There still is. Watch any movie. Oh my God. Watch any superhero movie. Watch any fucking war movie. Watch any of these things. Like, we just had 1917 come out just a few years ago. It was an amazing war flick that showed bravery of soldiers on the front line of World War I. Like, this still happens. I have no clue what you're talking about.
And it seems like there's no more room in the world for dangerous men. It doesn't seem to be a virtue that's even being put forth. But I know people out there.
And let's say there was getting less and less room for men who, I don't know, shoot other men or kill other men for a career. That's a good thing. Why would that be a bad thing?
There, though it's not mainstream and it's not really in front of you anymore. I know, for my part, courage is still a contagious thing. I still feel moved by the stories of heroes. I want to be a more courageous man. I want to be able to stand up even when it costs me something dearly. I want to be a braver version of me. Courage hasn't died to everyone. I think it's like hibernating there, and lots of propaganda and the tides of antithetical ideology is suppressing it. I think hidden in people out there is still that journey.
So here's this call to action of don't get offended, don't blame other people. What value courage?
For personal responsibility.
Congratulations, you made it a small 4-page self-help book.
And gritty, strong will, and bravery and courage, and to be able to stand for.
While you're at it, guys, brush your teeth. There's not enough teeth brushing going on in today's society.
Something greater than ourselves. I think that's still buried in our souls, and it can't be eradicated, though right now it is suppressed. I think it's time to really just throw that off and to be able to stand tall again and recognize, hey, though culture may be getting very weak, now it's time for me to be able to put myself in positions of strength. Right? And so you just look at the 4 different ways and say, I don't want to be any one of those. And then we just do the opposite. Whatever you see culture doing, just do the opposite now. Everything seems so evil and upside down. Whatever's happening in mainstream culture, you want to know what to do, right? Do the opposite. Whatever everyone's saying, say the other thing. Whatever everyone's doing, do the opposite thing. It was never like that before, right?
Dude, this is all performative. This is so performative.
It's just super, super evil. Everything's evil. This has been a rant of a blossoming curmudgeon. I feel like a grandpa up here, just making a case for old traditional values.
You're not making a... Oh, whatever. Okay, I'm done with this guy. Okay? Look, it's silly, ridiculous. He's not even making points. I don't even know what to say about it. There's nothing else to say about it anyway. What should we talk about next anyway? After that amazing about how we're the weakest ever.